Jackal returned to the back room of the shop. He put the sacks of glass jars down and showed his father the object, leaving out the part of how it absorbed his blood after he had cut his finger. The last thing they needed was someone to overhear that and send the authorities to their house. His father said it should have been brought back to Miss Harum, and they shouldn't take anything from an old, blind woman. But Jackal told him she wanted them to have it, and his father had him put it away in the house above the shop. Currently, Jackal had taken a barrel and pried it open to check its contents. The smell of fermented fruit wafted up into his nostrils and filled them with their confusing blend of sweetness and rotting sourness. It was too much for him to handle, so he threw the lid back on. He heaved the barrel over to the other side of the room with the rest of the wine barrels, carefully placing it on top of the pre-existing pyramid. Once it was placed meticulously on top of the others, Jackal turned around and saw a mouse gnawing on an apple core. Jackal didn't think twice before trying to catch it, and by catch it he ran up to it and lunged headfirst into a crate. The mouse simply jumped up, landed on his head, and bounced down onto the floor and scuttled across to the other side of the room before turning and staring at him, still gnawing on the core as it had before. Jackal's skull ached, as anyone else's would after breaking open a wooden crate. He was seeing two of anything, and the world was spinning. He just sat there for a few seconds to let his world fix itself. As he picked himself up out of the rubble of splintered wood and fruit, the mouse ran out the door, into the shop, out the shop's door, and into the streets. He felt a pair of hands grasp his arm and help him up.
It's most likely going to come back. You know that, right?
He recognized the voice of his sister. She must have heard the commotion and come up to check on him.
Slipped my mind.
He said through gritted teeth. His head was still throbbing.
All I could think of was getting out of the shop.
Well, you succeeded there. And just FYI, this wouldn't happen if I was here.
The hands left his arm and he heard her start picking up the apples and putting them in another crate. He turned around to start helping. Why their father wasn't coming back due to the noise was strange. When he bent to pick up the ones that had rolled across the floor, he noticed the mat on the floor was upturned, revealing a brass ring attached to one of the floorboards.
Hey, Kiara.
He heard his sister turn and walk up behind him. The ring looked like a latch, as it was in an indent in the wood which was laden with the same metal as the ring, brass. There was a strange symbol imprinted on it. It was like the sun, but the other half had spots on it, almost like the face of the moon.
So, are you going to open it or what?
It was hidden for a reason, Kiara. I don't think it's meant to be opened.
So you called me here for what? Just to show me and cover it back up?
Maybe.
Move over.
His sister shoved him over and went for the latch.
No, Kiara, wait!
She grabbed hold of the brass ring and pulled it up, sending a cloud of dust flying into the air as a chill spread through the room. The chamber beneath sucked in the air like a corpse gasping for breath. A smell came up from the dark space under the floorboards that was worse than the fermented fruit.
Okay, you first.
Jackal barely had time to react before he was swung into the hole in the floor. Luckily, he landed on soft dirt at the bottom.
Thanks for the heads up.
He shouted up into the light.
You're welcome.
Was the response he got. He stood up and went to move forward, but smacked his head on a beam of wood. He tumbled backward and fell again on his back.
You know, I could use some kind of light.
He said up to his sister. He didn't hear a response, but he heard footsteps go out the door. He hoped his sister would return before they got caught. He peered into the darkness as much as he could. All he saw was the beam he had hit his head on. Aside from that, there was just nothing. He heard his sister come back and lower a small lit lantern down to him. The lantern helped very little, but it was just enough that he could see more wooden beams before he hit his head. The space was just tall enough for a person to stand in if they hunched over a bit. Jackal proceeded towards the back of the room. He kept getting facefuls of cobwebs. The ground was earthen and gave a horrible musty smell of dry mold. He jumped back and hit his head on another wooden beam, cursing the centipede that had sped across the floor. He reached a wall and, looking back, he guessed it was maybe 8 feet long. There was nothing, just an empty space under the shop. Did their father know about this? He looked over the space he was in and saw a hole in the dirt. It was a shallow hole and had something in it. He brushed away some dirt and found a chest. It was about as wide as a man's rib cage. He set the lantern down and grabbed hold of the 2 handles on the sides. He heaved it out of the ground and placed it in front of the hole it had just come from. It was surprisingly heavy, probably because it seemed to be made of a very thick iron. The same strange symbol from the latch on the trap door was imprinted on the lid. He was just about to open it when he was grabbed on the shoulder. Jackal released the lid, which closed with a light thunk. He spun around, looking into the eyes of his father. They were filled with distaste, and he could tell he was in trouble. His father reached past him and locked it shut with a key, which he put back around his neck.
What are you doing down here, boy?
Nothing.
He could tell his father knew he was lying.